Everyone. I am just going to make sure that we are streaming live right now. If you know me, then you know how exciting this is right now for me. And before I begin to start gushing, I will simply say that it is such an honor to be here with all of you today that have taken time out of your day to tune in to this special stripped down version of the Joy Spot. My name is Shari, Alyse, if this is your first time joining me, and I've come to be known as America's Joy Magnet, which of course comes with no pressure at all. I am a two-time TEDx speaker. I'm the best-selling author of Love Yourself Happy, and I am the host of this show. And I'm going to introduce the gentleman next to me in just a moment, but I'm going to wrangle him and force him to sit here with me while I share all about what Neale Donald Walsch, the way that he has impacted my life, how the work that I do today with joy is a direct experience, reflection of what he's done for me and allowed me to receive and recover in my life, to discover. But if you're here watching with me live, before we get into that, say hello. I'm going to check to see if there's comments with everybody, and let me know. We have Mariah who's here. We've got Francois who's watching us with us. We've got quite a few people here with us today, Neale. But let me talk to you a little bit about Neale. Neale Donald Walsch has written 39 books on contemporary spirituality and its practical application in everyday life. With an early interest in religion and a deeply felt connection to spirituality, Neale spent the majority of his adult years thriving professionally, yet searching for greater meaning in his life. He has said that this yearning led to a series of deeply personal spiritual encounters, which he experienced as direct exchanges with the divine. A series of books titled Conversations with God, this is just one, emerged from those moments, and they have been translated into 37 languages. 7 books in his series have gone on to reach the New York Times Bestseller list, book 1 remaining there for over 2.5 years. His latest book, which we're going to talk about today, The God Solution, was published in December of 2020, and it invites humanity to embrace a new global ethic based on a refined and clarified definition of God. The book proposes that there is a single statement of spiritual truth upon which all the world's religions could agree, and which would birth a shift of spiritual paradigms around the globe of such magnitude that it would produce peace and happiness on our planet at last. Please welcome to the Joy Spot, Neale Donald Walsch. Hi, Neale.
Thank you, Shari, for those wonderful words of introduction. And all I can say to you, having looked at you here these past few moments, is that I wish that your opening statement was true. You said this was a stripped down version of your program, and I thought, oh wow, I'm so happy. And now I see that you're probably going to keep all of your clothes on. So darn it. But
darn it.
You really got me pretty excited there at the beginning.
You know what, Neale? I was going to make a joke about that, and I said, maybe that's not quite right on air, but you went right for it. So I'm so pleased. Thank you. You're so funny.
It's low-hanging fruit. How could I?
It was right there. It was right there. So I'm so excited that you're joining the Joy Spot today with everyone. I'm going to share something with those with you, and for those who are watching. I know you don't know this, and this is not a plug for my book, by the way, but in my book, Love Yourself Happy, I had wanted you, Neale, to write the foreword to it. And I couldn't figure out a way to get to you. And so who wrote it instead was God, G-O-D, which for me stands for guidance of the divine. And I wrote the foreword, and you're listed in it as the person I wanted to share, but God showed up and said, well, what about if I write it, Shari? And I said, okay. And the entire intro is written from the space of where I read from Conversations with God. And I just want to share for a moment something that I wrote so you understand where I was when I read this book. I wrote, I look back and I see the exact moment in time where my spiritual reawakening began. I was sitting in my bedroom in my apartment in Queens, New York, in the dark, with a few candles lit, my journal next to me. I was immersed in the book Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch. I'm not sure what I expected to find behind this ink, but what I found changed everything. It gave me hope. It settled things within. It had me breathe just a little easier. Something ached less. It wasn't until decades later that I understood what was happening. What I was experiencing in those quiet moments was the opening of my soul. It was the connecting to it. I was allowing what I was feeling to come out and up to the surface. I was experiencing the re-meeting or reunification with myself. Me and God, me and my soul, me and peace. And I say that because I was a young girl who had experienced trauma and I was very disconnected. I was fresh out of college. My heart had just been broken. And for the first time, I felt lost and alone and searching for deeper meaning and connection and purpose in my life. And your book gave me a grounding. It gave me a path, a roadmap back to myself. So thank you.
Those are important words for me to take in. I'm very appreciative. I'm humbled by what I've heard you say. I'm only so happy. I need to share with everyone who's watching us now that the words in my book, Conversations with God, are not my own. I simply took dictation, and I don't mean that gratuitously. That was actually my experience. I simply took dictation. I was in the same place that you're describing, lying on my bed years ago thinking, well, I don't get it. What is the point of all this? Well, I don't understand what's going on. Somebody help me, because I had been homeless. I was living on the sidewalk, living on the street, sleeping on the concrete, and going from person to person with my hand out, asking for anything, even a quarter or a $50. And I remember one man said to me, well, what's a $50 going to do? I said, you know what, sir? If I could get a $50 from every person I asked today, I could actually have something to eat before the end of the day. Please, whatever change you have in your pocket. And he reached in his pocket and he gave me some pocket change. And I appreciated it so much. That went on for a year in my life. It wasn't a couple of bad weeks or a couple of tough months. This was an entire solid year of my life. So I did, of course, fell to my knees and I said to God, what is it that I don't understand? The understanding of which would change everything. And then she said to me, take this down. And I began to write down what I was hearing. And so that's what happened. And those are the words that you say touched you in an important way. You're very kind and very generous to say those words of appreciation. But I want everyone who's watching us to know that I did not write what was in Conversations with God. I simply took dictation. And one of the most important things that God said to me in those moments was, because I asked God, why me? Why are you talking to me? Why did you pick me? And God said, no, Neale. I talk to everyone all the time. The question is not to whom do I talk? The question is, who's listening?
And it seems I was all those years back. And that conversation that you had with God, do you feel, because people will say, well, you were talking to yourself, to your imagination.
Yes, I asked God that question. I said, how do I know this is not my imagination? And you know what she said?
I do.
She,
We tell us.
she said, Neale, why would I not use your imagination? Where do you suppose Mozart's music came from? Where do you suppose Michelangelo's art came from? Where do you suppose Shakespeare's words came from? Of course I would use your imagination. And that doesn't mean that what you're imagining is not the highest thought, the grandest version, or the greatest vision you could have. In fact, it probably will be the highest thought, the greatest version. So use your imagination and imagine the best possible answer you could possibly receive to the questions you're asking. Yes, I have used your imagination. You're darn right. So I let it go with that.
And you just, how long did that dictation go on for?
Oh, gosh. What became book one went on for many, 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 many days. I mean, many weeks. I didn't count the time, but it was the better part of a year. And of course, you have to understand, I wasn't trying to write a book at that point. It didn't occur to me that this would ever be seen by anybody else. I knew I was having a very sacred personal experience, and that no one but myself would ever know about or hear about. But I was told in the conversation, you will make of this one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. And you know what I thought? I thought, yeah, of course. Now I gotcha. I really did say to myself, now I gotcha. Because that's not going to happen. I mean, no publisher, no legitimate publisher. I could self-publish if I wanted to, but no actual legitimate publishing company is going to put out a book by a man who says he's talking to a guy. I could imagine the publisher racing out to the workroom floor,
Uh-huh.
Everything, stop presses. I got a guy here who's talking to God. I knew it wasn't.
We got to lock this guy up.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't going to happen. There wasn't a chance in the world.
Yeah.
So, but my phone rang one day. I sent it to maybe 4 or 5, not 20 or 30, but 4 or 5 publishers. And my phone rang. And it was one of the publishers I sent it to. And he said, we want to put your book out. I said, no, you're kidding. Really? He said, yes. We do want to change the title. We think the title is going to be off-putting. We'd like to change the title. And I said, I'm sorry, you can't change the title. The experience I had is that I was having conversations with God. If you're going to change the title, you're not going to publish the book.
Hmm.
And you know what the publisher said? I don't get very many first-time authors who argue with the publisher before they even get to stage 2. Are you telling me that you're going to refuse to let me publish your book by any other title? I said, that's what I'm telling you. He said, well, okay, fair enough. It's not going to sell very well because people are going to be put off by that title, but we'll put it out with whatever title you've chosen. So, and he was right. I thought, if this sells 500 copies, it'll be a lot. Well, it didn't sell 500 copies. It only sold 13 million.
Yeah.
Not bragging, just saying. And then I understood, I guess when God tells you something, Neale, you probably want to believe it. So after people in 37 languages around the world began reading this material, I realized this was never intended for me alone to begin with, obviously.
Right.
It was intended for the world entire.
Why do you think that it sold 13 million copies?
Because people related to it, because I was asking questions that everyone asks. Because they saw me as, James Thurber's everyman, capital E. I was everyman, every person. So people read the book and they went, wow, that's the exact thing I wanted to know. Wow, that's exactly what I was experiencing. Good grief, this guy's talking for me. In fact, one person actually wrote me a letter that actually said that. She said, Neale, you wrote my book. You just beat me to it.
Hey, you got to jump on it when you have that idea, right?
Yeah. So I think people related to it because it's the common human experience. And that's been touched in these conversations that I had with the God of my understanding.
That was my next question for you, because we are obviously talking about conversations with God, and we're going to be talking about your new book, The God Solution. And so who is God to you?
I can define God in two words. And frankly, I think the problem in the world today is that we have complicated the whole business of who and what God is. You know, there are 4,200 religions on the face of the earth right now. Most people find that hard to believe. I found it hard to believe when I first discovered it.
Yeah.
I actually Googled the question. I wrote in Google one day, how many religions are there on earth? The answer came back 4,237 or whatever it was. Faith traditions currently being practiced,
That's crazy.
not just throughout human history, but being practiced right now. And I thought, wow, no wonder the world is such a mess around this topic of God, because we have 4,000 different ways of looking at it and 4,200 different beliefs about it. So I thought, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just come up with, an easy way to define and to understand God? So when you ask me, what is God to me? I come back with my two-word answer: pure love.
When I read that in your book, in your newest book, my soul felt like it exhaled. And then you went ahead and answered what I know most people, and you imagined immediately, would think, well, what kind of big revelation is that? Because everybody has this idea of what pure love is. And so
I'm not sure that everyone has, not that I want to quarrel with you, but I'm not sure that everyone has this idea of what pure love is. But people do have an idea of what love is. In fact, somebody almost always stands up in the back of the room when I'm doing a live lecture. Those are things we used to do.
before all this.
Yeah, before all this. But somebody would stand up in the back of the room and say, oh, Neale, really? I've come here to listen to you for the last 25 minutes for you to tell me that God is love. We all know that God is love. Every religion on the earth teaches at least that God is love. And I said, that's not what I said. I didn't say that God is love. I said that God is pure love. Now my friend in the back of the room will say, okay, what's the difference? And then I tell them, the difference is that pure love needs, expects, requires, and demands nothing in return. We can't even love the person on the pillow next to us in that way, much less the stranger across the street, or the man downtown at the post office, or the people around the world that we only hear about and never meet. We can't imagine loving in that way, because without, again, wanting to quarrel with you, I don't think that everyone, in fact, does think in terms of pure love. They think in terms of love, but they never think of love as an energy that requests, requires, expects, or at least hopes for nothing in return. But when I took that idea into my life, and when I began to, I'm going to say, try to practice it as often as I could, because it's not taught commonly in the human experience. So I never even learned how to love purely without needing or expecting or demanding or hoping for anything in return. And I took that into my life in a very powerful way. I don't mean to be inappropriate here, Shari, but we're both adults, so I can talk about this. I took it into my life in a sexual experience that I was having. It was the first time I had that idea in my mind when I was entering into a romantic encounter with a lady. I thought, what if I needed, expected, required, certainly demanded, and not even hoped for anything in return? What if this actually wasn't about me at all, at any level, except to the degree that there was something that I chose to express and to share with another? What if it was all about that other person from the start to the end of the experience? And I had a romantic encounter with that mindset. It was the first time in my life that I had entered that moment, a moment like that, with that kind of a mindset. I'm not even going to try to describe what occurred after that, but I can tell you that it changed my mind, not just about how to make love in a sexual way, but how to make love to life, to life itself. And by the way, not the least of which, how to make love to God. How to actually say, you know what, God, I'm even going to go to a place where I don't need, expect, require, and hope for anything in return from you. And then I heard God say, now you've got it. Now you understand the secret formula. And now you understand how I have loved you from the very first moment of your existence.
I receive that now on the deep level that I received it when I first read that. And it's in that full acceptance and purity that we're able to move forward. And I think when I talk about people believing that God, when I say pure love, you're right. I mean love, but everyone has their definition or their limitations or their idea of what love is. And as you say, the no strings attached, pure love, how do people, if we've never feel like we've experienced that, how do we see that within God? Does that make sense?
Well, we see it within God. I can't talk about other people, but I can tell you how I see it within God. I notice how God has loved me and blessed me, no matter how I show up, when I'm being my best self and when I'm being, frankly, something, or when I have been something less than my best self. You know, I got to tell you something that's going to be very daring and might even be a real put off for a lot of people. Gosh, dare I say this? But I was told, Neale, Hitler went to heaven. And I said, no, don't tell me that. Come on, this is one of the worst human beings in our judgment ever on the face of the earth. Don't tell me that. Hitler went to hell. And God said, sweetheart, there's no such place as hell. I don't judge, condemn, and damn anyone. I don't punish anyone. I said, not even the worst of us? People who caused the death of millions of others? And the answer that I got was, understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. When you understand how a human being, any human being, could have done or said such things as he did, that doesn't mean you condone it. It doesn't mean you agree with it. It doesn't mean you want it ever to be repeated, but it does mean you can understand how an unevolved person, a person living in that mindset, could have done or said such things. Understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. I said, gosh, I'm having a hard time with that. I'm really having a hard time with that. God said, have you ever held a baby in your arms? I said, well, yes, of course. I have 9 children of my own. I have held 9 babies in my arms. God said, imagine you're holding a baby in your arms and you see the utter perfection of that baby, the beauty and the innocence of that life form. And this little baby has an unfortunate biological accident. While you're holding her, what do you say to the baby? Oh, it's okay, I forgive you. Of course. Understand forgiveness is not even part of the equation. You understand that the baby doesn't even know what it's doing. It doesn't have any control over it. It's a baby. I said, well, yeah, but you're making a comparison that doesn't fit the situation we're talking about. God said, really? Because I see you all as babies. You haven't even begun to understand the grandest truths of life, much less the grandest truths of who you are. Yours is an evolving species, just beginning to just look at, much less seek to apply, the most fundamental truths of love and life itself. There are highly evolved beings elsewhere in the cosmos, I promise you, God said to me. They're out there, highly evolved beings, but Earthlings are still not in that group. And so, yes, there's no such place as hell. I do not judge, condemn, and punish anyone. There's only one place to go when you do the thing that you call die, and that's back home to me. And some of you are the deepest example of the prodigal son. But even to the prodigal son, I say, welcome home. Let's see if you can change your mind and do better next time. And so we're all given endless opportunities through physical lifetime after physical lifetime to decide and to declare, to express and to fulfill, to become and to experience who we really are. Not just God's children, but individuations of the divine. Dare we think such things? Dare I even say such a thing? That I imagine I'm an individuation of the divine? This is what God would have us know and would have us experience, would have us express, and would have us demonstrate. Because God knows if we all demonstrated that truth, the world would change overnight.
Okay. I could just, of course, listen to you all day. I'm like, I want to talk about, all of this is a part of your book. And as you're sharing what I hear you speaking of what God is, this pure love, and all of the religions you talked about. And it said in your book, you said that 85% of people can agree that there is a God, that there is a higher power. And yet we all...
Surveys, by the way, that number didn't come out of thin air. Anthropologists have done surveys over the past 10 years. And this number is on the internet as well. Those surveys have shown that 8 out of 10 people from culture to culture, from country to country, believe in a higher power, some kind of higher power. There's something more going on here than meets the eye, if you please. But we can't agree on what that higher power is, or what, if anything, it wants, or what, if anything, it does if it doesn't get what it wants. We can't come to an agreement about that, which is why more wars have been fought in the name of God than for any other single reason in the history of this world. So it's time for us to see if we can't come to an understanding, come to a simple agreement, a single statement that all religions could agree on. But The challenge is that religions have been teaching us of a different kind of God. The single statement, of course, is that God is pure love, that God does not judge, condemn, or punish anyone. But of course, that violates the doctrine, the dogma of 95% of the world's religions. And so it's theologically not just revolutionary, it's theologically blasphemous. It's called heresy. We can't believe in a God who would love us so much that she would welcome us home, no matter what. That he would give us opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, even in any individual life, from moment to moment opportunities to announce and declare, to express and fulfill, to become and to demonstrate who we really are. Now, not to get into a sermon about it, but I can conclude my thought here with the following observation. Is it a coincidence that every spiritual master that we have recognized on this planet, from Moses to Jesus to Buddha, to Catherine of Genoa, to Hildegard of Bingen, to Joan of Arc, to Julian of Norwich, to the Blessed Mother, that every spiritual master, male and female through the years, has said each in their own way exactly the same thing? Is that a coincidence? Or is it possible that there's something they understand, the understanding of which would change everything?
You call these people, those who are willing to listen, to understand, who have changed the course of history, idea heroes. And all you're simply proposing, what I hear in this book, The God Solution, is that we are all willing to change the conversation, the definition, to willing to understand, to think differently. Is that correct?
Yes, but it takes idea heroes to do that. And people say to me, well, give me a modern day or at least a contemporary example. What do you mean by an idea hero? An idea hero is someone who espouses, who shares, who lives into, who demonstrates an idea that she knows ahead of time more than one person is going to disagree with. In fact, probably the majority of people are going to disagree with it. But he doesn't give up his idea anyway, because she knows that this is the truth that lives in his heart and in his soul and in his mind. This is his innermost, highest reality. But it takes an idea hero to actually step into the speaking and the demonstration of that. I'll give you a simple example. Galileo. Galileo said in, I think, 1645, somewhere in there, he said, the earth revolves around the sun. The church at the time, the most powerful social institution on the planet in that century, said that he was wrong, that he was blasphemous, that he was speaking heresy, that he was a heretic, because the church taught that the earth was the center of the universe, God's greatest creation, that human beings were God's greatest creation, and therefore the sun must revolve around the earth, because the earth is the center of the universe. So they condemned Galileo. They excommunicated him. They put him under house arrest for the rest of his life. Change your mind, they said. Change your statement. And he couldn't, and he wouldn't, because he knew what was true for him, what he had come to understand. So he was an idea hero.
Why do you think that this pure love, why do you think we can't come to agreement on what God is in this way? If so many of the religions, as you said, are well, you didn't say this, but we know this, teach the golden rule. They're all based along the same line. So there's so many things we can agree on, but do you think it's fear? What do you think that it is that we can't, because if we can't agree on what God.
First of all, I'm going to quarrel with you again. Forgive me
Okay.
for interrupting you.
Oh, no, please.
But I thought I heard you say most of the people I've heard about and kind of live into believe in things like the golden rule. Actually, nobody believes in the golden rule, relatively speaking. Maybe a few people, maybe 5 or 8%. 92% of the world does not believe in the golden rule, which, by the way, I hope we all know what we're talking about here, folks. You do understand what the golden rule says, right? The golden rules.
I do.
The golden rule says, do unto others as you would have it done unto you. Do you think we're living in a world where most of the people do unto others as they would have it done unto them? Or do we live in a world where even world leaders, actually chiefs of state, insult each other, call each other silly playground names, bully each other verbally, and even bully each other physically? Do we live in a world where the golden rule is practiced by major corporations?
Definitely not.
By our political parties? By our chiefs of state? No, excuse me. We live in a world where just the opposite is true, where our politics, our economics, our social systems, and even our religious systems are dysfunctional because they actually do the opposite of what the golden rule invites us to do. So, the reason that people have a difficult time with hearing the messages of idea heroes is that they have been living under a system which imagines that survival is the highest instinct, the fundamental instinct. We call it, anthropologists tell us it's the basic instinct. They say survival is the basic instinct. And so we go to war. We kill thousands of people because we can't agree on where the borderline should exist between two countries. Excuse me? I'm sorry? We're having a problem deciding where the border between two countries is, so let's kill 30 or 40,000 people while we're arguing about it? Hello? And so we have been living in a world that says we will do whatever it takes for us and for our point of view, by the way, to survive. This even comes into our individual relationships with our marriages. Hopefully we're not hurting each other physically, I hope. But even when our beloved partner, our spouse, disagrees with us, for me, for the first 6 marriages that I entered into, yes, you heard that right, I married 6 times, thinking, I got to be able to get this right. What am I doing wrong? But you know what? When my spouse, all, by the way, beautiful, wonderful ladies, to whom I owe deepest apologies for bringing myself into their life, myself the way I was. But if they made me wrong, I was about surviving the moment. I didn't have to worry about physically surviving. My life wasn't in danger, but I was going to be surviving that moment. I was going to be the winner of that argument, of that discussion. Obviously, you're wrong about everything and I'm right about everything. It's showing up in this very conversation. Twice I've already quarreled with you because, of course, you're desperately wrong and I'm completely right about everything that I have to say. So,
hold your space.
But the truth is, I have been wrong in my life. There was a time, let me just check my phone because I can't remember. When was the last time I was wrong?
Never.
When I was 18. Okay.
That's a really good record there, Neale.
But that's why, that's the answer why we think that survival is the basic instinct.
Right.
But here's what God said to me, Neale. If survival is humanity's basic instinct, why is it that when a person is walking down the road and they turn to the left, they see a building on fire? Oh my God, that building is on fire. Does anybody see that building on fire? And they hear a baby crying inside the building. Wah, wah. They run into the building to save the crying baby. Even if they don't think they can be successful, they run into the building anyway. Their first thought is not, am I going to live through this? Their first thought is not, am I going to live? Their first thought is, oh, who am I really in this moment? And the average person runs into the building to save the crying baby. Because the average person understands that in moments like that, the basic instinct is the expression of your divinity.
That's who I see people as.
Yes.
And that's what I imagine that you might quarrel, that most of us know who we are, but we don't practice or act in that way. But I believe that deep within, we know it. We are just, as you said, in survival. And
I'm going to agree with you.
okay, thank God.
Yeah,
Thank God.
Mark it down. Mark down the day and the hour.
It's Mark.
Yeah, I think, and because what the proof of the fact that you're right about that is how we act in what I call the burning building moment.
Mm-hmm.
Then we do in fact know who we really are, and who we really are shows up in such moments. You know, this is a true story. It was in all the newspapers a few years ago. There was a man standing on the platform at the train station, the subway station in New York City, and the subway, was coming in. You could hear it coming down the tracks, and a small child, in fact, fell off the platform and started running around the tracks. And the people on the platform were aghast. They were stunned, they were shocked, frozen, paralyzed, not knowing exactly what to do. But there was a guy who, of course, jumped immediately off the platform and grabbed the child, but he realized that the train was only seconds away, 2 or 3 seconds away. He didn't even have time to turn around and walk back to the platform and lift the child up. So he put the child between the rails of the tracks, placed himself over the child, and I'm sure thought to himself, if anybody's going to die here, it's not going to be this child. And the subway, this is a true story, I'm not making this up, and the subway train raced over him and came to a screeching halt, and the man was unharmed, a few scratches on his back, but nothing major. The child, of course, also survived. And all the newspapers showed up and the TV stations were there and they were declaring the man, you're a hero, you're a hero. And he said something quite extraordinary. He said, I'm not a hero. I did what anybody would do. So yes, I agree with you that we know at the depth of our being who we are, but we have been taught and trained not to show up in that way in almost every case, except when really and truly the chips are down.
Yeah. So how do we get people with this, not this idea, this knowing of pure love, how do we get people to embrace this? Because if we can't come to an agreement on who God is before and the religion, because of all of those things, not how do we get them to agree with pure love, but what does pure love look like? Because I want people to walk away from this conversation with this understanding and agreement to move this conversation forward.
Pure love looks like how I interact with you and with everyone when I need nothing in return, when I expect and even hope for nothing in return. That's what pure love looks like. And we can practice that. We can, because we haven't been taught. We have not been taught to love each other that way. Not in most families and not in most cultures. But we can practice that. We can practice it one person at a time. We can start, in fact, with the person on the pillow next to us. Dare you, double dare you.
Mm. I'm going to remember that in the moments of frustration, because you are right. It usually is the people closest to us that we have the most challenge to practice, to not expect, to not want anything in return, and
to not need anything in return. It's something to want something in return. It's one thing to desire something in return. I almost want to say fair enough. But to need it in order for us to be happy, in order for us to be peaceful, in order for us to be content, in order for us to be loving, to need it in order for us to be loving, that's a trade deal. Countries have trade deals with each other. Nations have trade deals with each other. And I had trade deals with my first 6 wives. People think, by the way, I'm kidding when I actually did have 6 wives. I married over and over again. I thought, I'm going to do this till I get it right. So I made lifetime, I thought, ring on the finger commitments with 6 different ladies. But all I had was trade deals. I'll give you this, you give me that. I'll give you this, you give me that. There's something in me you found attractive. I'll give you that. And you give me what I find attractive in you. And we've got a deal. And I, by the way, I had the perfect Valentine's Day card that I would send to my wives, my dearest, my darling, my beloved. I trade you very much. And I will never stop trading you. I will trade you until the end of time. But if you stop trading me, the deal is off. Finally, after 6 failed marriages, I'm not bragging about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ashamed of it. I'm just saying it. I finally met a woman who I could love without needing, expecting, requiring, hoping for anything in return. Not because of who she was. I didn't find a woman that I could love because of that, but because of who I had finally become.
Yes.
And I was able to look at her and say, you know what? I don't need anything from you. And she was able to look at me and say, likewise, I don't need anything from you either. I totally got it. She could have any man she wanted. He had a sparkling personality, incredible intelligence. She was drop dead gorgeous. She could have any man she wanted. She needed me like she needed a hole in the head. But she didn't need me. But she loved me anyway. Wow. I mean to say she loved me anyway. I was showing up short of abuse. She would not accept abuse, verbal or physical, but any other way I was showing up, she could love me. She did not play a game called I love you if. But you know what? I had been married 6 times, so I was nervous, I was scared. And after we knew each other a short time, about a week and a half or 10 days, we were going on a date. I was going to take her to see a play. We're in the car, we're driving along. She looked at me from the passenger seat. She said, you know what? I think we should be married. I looked at her and I said, you don't want to say that to me twice. She said, no, I mean it. I think we should be married. We have the same philosophies about life, the same understandings about God. We even like the same food. We like the same music. We're going to see a play together because we both love the theater. And we're not that bad in bed either.
Well, pure love. It doesn't sound that way.
She said, maybe we should be married. I reached out my hand across the front seat of the car and I said, done. Shaking her hand. The next day we flew to Las Vegas. where you can get a marriage license with no waiting period. Within 1 hour, we were in a wedding chapel and had become man and wife. It was 16 years ago. 16 years of bliss. Not because I found the right woman, but because I decided to become, or at least to work toward becoming, who I really am. The world can change overnight using the same formula. It's the solution that God has given to all of us, which is why I wrote a book called The God Solution.
What is your hope after, I think you've shared it, but we'll be more direct. What is your hope after people read The God Solution?
I hope they will pass it on. I hope they will step into the living of it. I hope they will use it, if nothing else, as an experiment to see if it's possible for them to step into it, and then to step into the living of it. I hope they will read very closely the last few chapters of that book, chapter 24 to 28, which is a virtual diagram. It's a plan. It's an action plan. It describes the manifestation process, the process by which we create our own reality. So I hope that they will read the book, step into the practicing of it, and I hope they will share it with others. And I tell people, by the way, I'll share it with you. If you want to share it with others, here's what I'll do. Send me an email today, and I will send you a copy of my author's manuscript. I'll upload it to your computer. I'll upload it right now to your computer. Just say, Neale, I would like a copy of The God Solution. And I'll send it to you in 30 seconds. It'll be on your computer. Then you can share it with everyone in your address book. Dare you, double dare you.
How do they contact you to get that?
Neale at nealedonaldwalsh.com. Quite simple. My name is what you'd expect it. My email name is what you'd expect it to be. Neale at nealedonaldwalsh.com. But you must spell my name correctly. As you know, the internet is unforgiving. So you must spell it the way, because my name is spelled in an unusual way. Neale, Donald, Walsch. So the address again, folks, should you want a copy of the book, Neale at nealedonaldwalsh.com.
You heard it here, folks. I've got a few closing questions for you because we're rounding out. I want to have another, we don't have time today, but another entire conversation about creating your own reality and the misconceptions around that. Read the book because you talk in depth about that, which I found so powerful. But I can't leave today without asking you, what is joy to you? How do you experience joy? What brings you joy?
Joy, I think what brings me joy is what brings everyone joy when you think about it. What brings me joy is noticing that I have just expressed my greatest truth with regard to who I am. Shari, when I was 7 years old, I knew who I was. I thought I was wonderful. I thought I was magnificent. I thought I was the greatest thing since sliced bread. I could actually sit down and play pick out a little song. I remember when I sat down at the age of 7 at a piano and I picked out Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. I found the notes after about 5 or 8 minutes, and my mother said, my God, he's got perfect pitch. Did you hear him? He just picked out Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, how I wonder where you are. My God, he's got it. And I felt, wow. So for me, joy is feeling like I felt about myself when I was 7. I want to write a book one day titled, You Were Right When You Were 7. So for me, joy is feeling that I am the cat's meow. Not from a place of ego, but from a place of yes, And that feeling, may I add one sentence?
Yeah.
I am filled with that feeling when the energy of who I am flows freely to others without expecting, requiring, hoping for, and needing anything in return. Just the feeling of expressing, that is pushing out, expressing. The feeling of expressing love for everything else. You know, I have a tree back in the backyard. I go out in the backyard, I hug the tree.
So do I. So do I.
I actually hug the tree and I just go, boy, oh boy, oh boy. I love you to pieces. I love you. Thank you for being here in my life. So that's, for me, joy. Joy is knowing and expressing, demonstrating who I really am.
So I'm mildly emotional right now because in 1997, as I told you and have shared here, you connected me to who I really was, or God through you connected me to who I really am. And in that connection, in that full expression of that, I have found my joy. And now my work that I've been called to do is to share that joy. And so you rounded that out, because that, of course, is, I wouldn't have created you any other way to not give that perfect answer for joy. But I have, before we, by the way, we've had so many comments and I've just been fully present with you and haven't even had a chance to. So thank you everyone that's been watching and filling in here with us. One last question for you, and then you're going to share with everyone again how they could find you. If you had a microphone, which you have right now, I'm sure, and you had the microphone spoke to the entire world and you had 30 seconds to share a message with the world, what would that be?
God says, you've got me all wrong. Then I would send a second message if they gave me another 10 seconds. Because I asked God, what is it I don't understand? Can you put it in a paragraph, God? God said, I can give it to you in a couple of sentences. I said, well, don't let me stop you. So this is the single most important message in conversations with God. Your life is not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. But in the largest sense, that is about you, because there's only one of us in the room.
Oh, Neale, I'm so glad that this one here today was you. And thank you to everybody who has been tuning in with us. And thank you for saying yes to this conversation, not with God, but with Shari.
Which means with God.
You are correct, and I will not quarrel with you on that one. I apologize for not making this more of a stripped down version for you, but I'm happy that, for everyone's sake, that I kept the clothes on.
Well, to tell you the naked truth.
I had a blog called that, The Naked Truth. I somehow seem to have this theme going on. Tell everyone what's the best way that you would like them to stay connected with you?
DWG stands for Conversations with God. So the way to stay connected is to just go to cwgconnect.com. I'm there every day, several times a day sometimes, especially in a platform at CWG Connect that they'll find called Ask Neale, where people can ask me any question they want to ask me. And of course, another way to stay connected with me is to continue watching your program, because you're going to have me as a regular guest from now on.
You made me blush in the beginning. I'm blushing now. I'm crying now. And yes, you all heard it here, so he can't go back on his word. Thank you, Neale, for you and for being so open to sharing and being open to God and to all of this and changing the world one word at a time.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it very much. Blessed be.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.